Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. So in the month of April was the O.W.L.s magical readathon, and I am happy to say that I got through all of my O.W.L.s and my career track is a librarian. So I did change out 2 of the books from my TBR that I originally had to complete my O.W.L.s, but they still fit the prompts, which is all that matter. So let's go ahead and get on into the 5 books that I read in the month of April. So as with all of my wrap-ups, I'm going to go ahead and start with my lowest rated book and go up to my highest rated book. The first book I'm going to be talking about is my 1-star book for the month, and that is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. And this book fit the prompt for transfiguration of reading a book that had shape-shifting, and it fit that prompt because in this book we follow a girl named Lyra, and Lyra is a siren, and Lyra is known as being the most ruthless siren in the ocean. She is known as the Prince's Bane because she purposely targets princes to kill them and steal their hearts. One day, Lyra disobeys her mother, the Sea Queen, and the Sea Queen, using magic, transforms Lyra into a human and tells Lyra that the only way that she can become a siren again is if she steals Prince Elian's heart and brings it to her as proof. Like I said, unfortunately, I did rate this book 1 star, which is really unfortunate because it's a YA fantasy that has to do with sirens and pirates and oceans and ships, which is something that I really enjoy. But this book just was a huge letdown, and I was really debating whether to DNF it several times throughout the book. To begin with, this book takes place on the ocean, and there was just so much potential for amazing description and amazing imagery in this book about being a siren and what that looked like and what the ocean looked like and all of these kingdoms that were so incredibly fantastical. And I just found the writing to be extremely dry with regards to the descriptions. I love very descriptive writing. I love lots of imagery that really makes me feel like I was there on the ocean in this case, and this book just did not deliver. I really had a lot of trouble with the characters too, and that goes for both the protagonist and the antagonists of this story. The Sea Queen, I just didn't find her believable as a villain. I didn't find our main character, Lyra, believable as a evil siren, and there was this thief who kind of enters the book and presents a conflict, and I just didn't find that story believable at all. I think that this book could have benefited in being 100 or 200 pages more so that these characters really had time to develop and become more real to me as a reader. But unfortunately, it's just a really short book, and these characters overall in the story just fell extremely flat. And I don't see myself picking up any more of this author's work in the future. The next book I read was a middle grade fantasy novel, and it is Ironhearted Violet by Kelley Barnhill. I listened to this one on audio and I got it from my local library. And this book fit the prompt of reading a book with heart in the title or on the cover because obviously we have the word hearted. But I was just in the mood for a really quick, easy, fun read, which is why I decided to go with a middle grade fantasy. I don't usually read a ton of middle grade because I find that I have trouble connecting with the themes of middle grade novels. And another thing that drew me to this book was that it was written by Kelley Barnhill, and she wrote The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which is a book that I hauled recently. So I was interested in seeing if she is an author that I would really connect with. In Ironhearted Violet, we follow Princess Violet, who loves reading and loves telling stories. And all of the stories that she hears and tells includes beautiful princesses with long hair and perfect skin and bright eyes. And Violet, unfortunately, is none of those things. She is not a pretty child. One day, Violet and her best friend discover a hidden room in the castle, and in that hidden room is a painting and a forbidden book. And as they read this book, they discover the Nimbus, which is an evil god that was banished to their world. Not only was this god banished in their world, but it was imprisoned in Violet's castle. The only thing that the Nimbus wants is to get out of its imprisonment, and it will do whatever it can, even if that means manipulating little Violet. This book was exactly what I was looking for at the time. It was a fun, cute read with a lot of fantasy elements. Kelley Barnhill really tells stories like a fairy tale. It just reminded me so much of a fairy tale. It had a big castle. It had dragons. It was just very middle grade fantasy, which is, like I said, exactly what I was looking for. I ended up giving it 3 stars because I just can't connect with middle grade as much as I can different types of works. I did appreciate the themes that were presented in this book. Like I said, Violet is not a beautiful princess, so we have themes about self-esteem and loving yourself that I really liked and think is really good for the target demographic of ages 8 to 12 years old. The next book I read was my second 3-star read of the month, and that was Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This fit the prompt of reading a book with witches or wizards. There is a witch in this book, which I had forgotten when I originally put it on my TBR. The king of the North, Defoe, employs a witch to help him win the war. So yes, there is a witch in this book. This is an adult grimdark fantasy, and I do have a spoiler-free trilogy review on the whole First Law trilogy, so I'll go ahead and link that up in the cards if you're interested in watching my review on the whole trilogy. This book I thought was a bit disappointing for a conclusion. I felt like it was way too battle-heavy and war-heavy, and there was a lot of things that I were expecting to happen in the third book that just didn't happen with regards to character growth. And like I said in my spoiler-free review, the one thing I did like about this book is that we had a lot of displays of magic, but the magic that was displayed in the final battle just seemed a little bit convenient and kind of thrown in there so that the good guys could win the war. So I'm not going to go into a huge synopsis of this book, but definitely if you enjoy grimdark fantasy, I would recommend this series and this book, and I do feel like the characters in this trilogy were very well developed and were definitely the best part of this book. The next two books I read were both 4-star reads, and the first one is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. This I read for the prompt of reading a book that takes place on the coast or at sea. First off, when I jumped into this book, I didn't realize that it was as old as it was. There is kind of like a preface in the beginning of this book, and it talks about Daniel Defoe's life and when he wrote this book, and he actually wrote it between the years of 1718 and 1723, so I did not realize that the book was this old, and the actual story itself takes place in the 1600s. I don't think I've read a book that, other than maybe Shakespeare, that has taken place in that type of time period, so I was really surprised and I actually enjoyed it more because of that. But this follows our main character, Robinson Crusoe, and he is basically your typical youth. He is impulsive, he wants to travel the world, and he wants to go to sea, and all his parents, especially his father, want for him are for him to get a trade and settle down and live a good, calm life so that he'll be safe and have a flourishing life. But Robinson Crusoe does the complete opposite, and he decides to become a sailor, and he does travel to different parts of Europe. He ends up traveling to Brazil and starting a plantation in Brazil, and this is over the course of several years, and on the way back from Brazil, he ends up getting shipwrecked in the Caribbean and cannot get off the island, I think it's of Trinidad. And he ends up spending, I think, 26 years on this island having to fend and survive for himself. So I really did like this book. I found it so interesting the way that Daniel Defoe could craft a book just around survival and make it interesting. I loved learning about how our main character used his resources and the knowledge that he had from working in Brazil on a plantation. I think he grew sugarcane and transferred that to growing things on this island. The main problem that I had with this book was just the writing style. You're basically describing your day-to-day survival skills, which can get a little bit tedious to read after a while and a little bit boring. So I think that's the only reason I didn't give this book 5 stars. And you also have to read this book with the lens in which it was written, because there are certain ideas that our main character has about the world he lives in that is not really relevant or even acceptable in 2020. So you kind of do have to go into that knowing that the man who wrote it grew up in this time period and was taught these things. So you do have to keep that in mind. But I found it really interesting, and I loved that even though this book was written in the 1700s and it took place in the 1600s, that there are themes presented that are still relevant to me as a reader today. And that's what I absolutely love about classics, that they do stand the test of time. So 4 stars for Robinson Crusoe. The last book I read in the month of April was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This is an adult contemporary romance, and this fit the prompt of reading a book outside of my normal comfort zone. I don't really pick up a lot of contemporaries, much less ones that have a heavy romance in it, but this one had piqued my interest a while ago, and it takes place in Alaska, so I did decide to pick it up, and I'm glad I did because I really enjoyed it. I also have a spoiler-free review of this book on my channel, so I'll go ahead and link that up in the cards if you're interested in watching that. But this book follows our main character named Kala, and Kala is a city girl who grew up in Toronto, and one day she finds out that her estranged father, who lives in Alaska, has been diagnosed with cancer, so she goes to Alaska to visit him and help him through his treatment. So this book has a lot of great themes about reconnecting with a parent, an estranged parent, one that you don't have a relationship with. It has a lot of themes about forgiveness and the importance of family, and then we do have a romance in here. Our male protagonist's name is Jonah, and he's a pilot who works for Kala's father and flies supplies around Alaska. And that is a kind of hate to love relationship. So if you enjoy hate to love relationships, then you would probably really enjoy this book. But the main reason that I enjoyed it so much was the atmosphere and the themes presented. And I will definitely look into picking up more of K.A. Tucker's work in the future. Alright, you guys, so that is it for my April wrap-up. So I did, like I said, complete my owls for the librarian track. If you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and do so by clicking that subscribe button as well as a little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. And I will see you soon in another one. Goodbye! Thank you.